The first bullet tore through the air, missing Elias Harper's shoulder by inches, but the second one didn't. It ripped into his thigh, a searing jolt that dropped him to the dust-choked ground of a desert outpost. He screamed Jamie's name, not for help, but because it was the only word that made sense in the chaos. Elias Harper, a 30-year-old Army captain, had always carried himself with the kind of quiet grit that made men follow him into hell. Stationed in a remote base in Afghanistan, he led a tight-knit unit through missions that left them scarred but alive. Among them was Jamie Torres, a 28-year-old medic with a laugh that could cut through the heaviest silence and eyes that held a spark Elias couldn't ignore. They'd met 2 years ago in Fort Bragg, North Carolina, where Jamie's quick wit and relentless optimism had disarmed Elias's guarded heart. By the time they deployed together, their bond had deepened into something unspoken but undeniable. A love that thrived in stolen glances and whispered promises under starlit skies. The ambush came at dawn. Their convoy, rolling through a narrow valley, was hit hard. Insurgents perched on cliffs, raining bullets and chaos. Elias barked orders, his voice steady even as fear clawed at him. Jamie was at his side, dragging a wounded soldier to cover, his hands steady despite the blood soaking his gloves. "Stay low, Captain," Jamie shouted, his voice cutting through the gunfire. Elias nodded, his heart pounding not just from the fight, but from the sight of Jamie, fearless and alive. They fought back to back, Elias's rifle spitting fire, Jamie patching wounds under a hail of bullets. But then a scream, sharp, guttural, tore through the air. Elias turned to see Jamie collapse, clutching his side, blood pooling beneath him. "No!" Elias roared, dropping beside him. He pressed his hands over Jamie's wound, willing the bleeding to stop, but Jamie's eyes were already fluttering, his breath shallow. "Stay with me, Jamie. You hear me? Stay." "I'm trying, Eli," Jamie whispered, his voice fading. You keep them safe." His hand reached for Elias's, a fleeting touch, before it fell limp. Elias screamed again, this time a sound that wasn't human, as medics pulled him away. Jamie was gone before the chopper arrived. Back in the States, Elias returned to their hometown of Willow Creek, a small Virginia town nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The war had left him hollow, his legs scarred but healing, his heart shattered. Willow Creek was proud of its veterans, and the town's memorial park, a quiet square with a stone obelisk engraved with the names of fallen soldiers, was its heart. Elias had expected to see Jamie's name there, a permanent mark of his sacrifice. But when he visited, his breath caught. The stone was blank where Jamie's name should have been. He confronted the town council, his voice shaking with rage. "Why isn't he on there? He died for this country." The councilwoman, a stern woman named Margaret Klein, avoided his eyes. "There were concerns," she said vaguely. "Some families didn't want controversy." Elias's fists clenched. He knew what she meant. Jamie had been open about being gay, unapologetic even in the face of whispers. The town, steeped in tradition, had erased him to avoid complications. Elias's grief turned to fury. He stood in the park at midnight, staring at the memorial, his breath visible in the cold. He wanted to tear it down, to carve Jamie's name himself. Instead, he made a choice. The next morning, he walked into a tattoo parlor on Main Street, his jaw set. "I want his name," he told the artist, a young woman with kind eyes. "Across my chest, big enough that no one can ignore it." The needle burned, but Elias didn't flinch. Each letter, JMIE, was a vow. When it was done, he looked in the mirror, the ink bold and raw against his skin. Jamie's name was no longer erased. It lived on him, a memorial no one could touch. Word spread fast in Willow Creek. Some called Elias brave, others called him reckless. The council tried to placate him, offering a small plaque in a corner of the park, but Elias refused. "A plaque isn't enough," he said. "He deserves to be remembered like everyone else." He began speaking at veteran gatherings, telling Jamie's story, his courage, his kindness, his love. Each word was a rebellion against the town's silence. But the fight wasn't over. Margaret Klein and her allies pushed back, claiming the memorial was for traditional heroes. The debate tore Willow Creek apart, exposing old wounds and forcing neighbors to confront their biases. Elias found allies in unexpected places. Sarah, a local baker whose brother was gay, Malik, a young journalist who wrote about Jamie's erasure, and even old Mr. Callahan, a Vietnam vet who'd lost friends to prejudice. Together, they rallied, holding candlelight vigils in the park, their voices rising in defiance. One night, Elias stood before a crowd, his shirt open to reveal the tattoo. "They can erase his name from stone," he said, his voice breaking. "But they can't erase him from me, or from any of us who loved him." The crowd was silent, then erupted in applause, some crying, others nodding. For the first time, Elias felt Jamie's presence, not as a ghost, but as a fire that wouldn't die. The vigils grew, drawing people from beyond Willow Creek. By spring, the park was packed every Friday night, candles flickering like stars against the dusk. Elias became a reluctant leader, his grief channeling into a movement. He wasn't just fighting for Jamie anymore. He was fighting for every soldier whose story had been silenced. But the weight of it was crushing. At night, alone in his small apartment above the hardware store, Elias would trace the tattoo on his chest, whispering Jamie's name like a prayer to keep the pain at bay. Sarah, the baker, became his anchor. She'd lost her brother to addiction after years of hiding his identity, and her quiet strength steadied Elias. "You're doing what he couldn't," she told him one evening, handing him a coffee as they planned the next vigil. "You're making people see." Elias nodded, but doubt gnawed at him. Was he honoring Jamie, or just chasing ghosts? The town council doubled down. Margaret Klein organized a counter-protest, claiming the vigils were politicizing the memorial. Her group, mostly older residents, held signs reading, "Respect our heroes," and "Keep tradition." Elias saw the hurt in their eyes, fear of change, of a world they didn't recognize. He wanted to hate them, but Jamie's voice echoed in his head. "Hate doesn't fix anything, Eli." So he tried to listen even when it hurt. One afternoon, Malik, the journalist, uncovered a bombshell. Digging through council records, he found emails revealing that Margaret had personally blocked Jamie's name from the memorial, citing community standards. The story hit the local paper, then went viral online. Suddenly, Willow Creek was national news. Reporters descended, cameras flashing as Elias stood by the memorial, his tattoo now a symbol of resistance. Social media exploded with justice for Jamie, and strangers sent letters of support, some sharing their own stories of love and loss. But fame came with a cost. Elias received threats, anonymous calls, slurs scrawled on his truck. One night, someone threw a brick through his apartment window, a note tied to it, "Leave or else." Sarah found him sitting among the glass, his hands shaking. "You don't have to do this alone," she said, helping him clean up. "We're family now." Elias nodded, but fear was creeping in. He wasn't just fighting for Jamie anymore, he was a target. The turning point came at a town hall meeting, packed to the brim with residents, reporters, and activists. Elias took the stage, his voice steady despite the knot in his chest. "Jamie Torres saved lives," he said. "He carried wounded men to safety. He held their hands when they were scared. And he loved me. That doesn't make him less of a hero. It makes him more. The room was split, half cheering, half jeering. Margaret stood, her face tight. This isn't about heroism, she said. It's about what's appropriate. Elias met her gaze. Erasing him isn't appropriate. It's cowardice. The crowd erupted, and chaos spilled into the streets. Elias found himself face to face with Margaret's son, Ethan, a hulking man in his 40s who'd served in Iraq. Ethan had never liked Jamie, always muttering about standards when they'd crossed paths at the base. Now he loomed over Elias, his voice low. "You're tearing this town apart," he growled. "For what? A name?" Elias didn't back down. "For the truth," he said. Ethan's fist clenched, but he walked away, leaving Elias shaken but unbroken. The next vigil was the biggest yet. Hundreds gathered, their candles a sea of light. Malik had organized a petition, signed by thousands, demanding Jamie's name be added to the memorial. Elias spoke, his voice raw. "This isn't just about Jamie. It's about every kid who's afraid to be themselves. Every soldier who's told their love doesn't count." As he spoke, he saw a figure in the crowd. Ethan, standing at the edge, his face unreadable. For a moment, Elias thought he saw a flicker of doubt in the man's eyes. That night, Elias dreamed of Jamie. They were back in Afghanistan, sitting under the stars, Jamie's head on his shoulder. "You're doing it, Eli," Jamie said, his voice warm. "You're making them see." Elias woke with tears on his face, the tattoo burning like a brand. He knew the fight was far from over, but for the first time he felt hope. The movement gained momentum, but so did the opposition. Margaret Klein rallied her supporters, framing Elias as an outsider stirring trouble. "He's not one of us," she said at a council meeting, her voice sharp. "He's using our memorial for his agenda." Elias, sitting in the back, felt the sting of her words. He'd grown up in Willow Creek, climbed its hills as a kid, fished in its streams. But now, because of who he loved, he was an outsider. Malik's articles kept the pressure on, exposing more council members who'd backed Margaret's decision. One, a retired pastor named Reverend Holt, publicly apologized, admitting he'd been swayed by fear. "I was wrong," he said at a vigil, his voice trembling. "Jamie was a hero, and I failed him." The crowd cheered, but Elias saw the pain in Holt's eyes, a man wrestling with his own guilt. It reminded Elias of his own doubts, the nights he wondered if he was fighting for Jamie or for himself. Sarah organized a fundraiser to commission a new memorial plaque, one that would include Jamie's name. The response was overwhelming. Donations poured in from across the country, along with letters from veterans, LGBTQ activists, and families who'd lost loved ones. Elias read each one, his heart swelling and breaking. One letter, from a young trans soldier named Riley, stuck with him. "Jamie's story gives me hope I won't be erased too." But the threats didn't stop. Elias's truck was vandalized again, this time with spray paint reading, "Freak." He found himself looking over his shoulder, jumping at shadows. Sarah urged him to take a break, but Elias refused. "If I stop, they win," he said. Still, the weight was crushing. He visited the tattoo parlor again, adding a small star beside Jamie's name, a symbol of the nights they'd spent dreaming of a future they'd never have. The council scheduled a vote on adding Jamie's name to the memorial. The night before, Elias couldn't sleep. He walked to the park, sitting on the bench where he and Jamie used to meet. He traced the words "Love wins always" carved into the armrest. A quiet act of defiance someone had left. Steadied him. He thought of Jamie's laugh, his courage, the way he'd made Elias feel alive. "I'm doing this for you," he whispered to the stars. The vote was chaos. The town hall overflowed, with supporters and opponents shouting over each other. Elias stood at the podium, his hands shaking but his voice clear. This isn't about politics. It's about a man who gave everything. You can't erase that. When the council voted, it was a tie 3-4-3 against. Margaret, as chair, had the deciding vote. The room went silent as she stood, her face pale. "I vote no," she said, her voice barely audible. Boos erupted, and Elias felt the air leave his lungs. But something shifted. Ethan, Margaret's son, stood up in the crowd. "Mom," he said, his voice loud enough to hush the room. "You're wrong." He turned to Elias, his eyes wet. "I served with Jamie. He saved my life once. I didn't want to see it then, but he was a better man than me." The room was stunned. Margaret sat down, her hands trembling. Ethan walked out, leaving a silence that felt like a turning point. The next morning, Elias found Ethan at the memorial, staring at the blank space where Jamie's name should be. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, his voice rough. "I didn't get it. Not till now." Elias nodded, unable to speak. They stood together, two soldiers bound by loss, and for the first time Elias felt the town might change. Ethan's public stand changed everything. The story of his apology spread, softening hearts that had been hardened by fear. Elias saw it in the small things. Neighbors who'd avoided him now nodded in greeting. A local diner owner who offered free coffee to vigil attendees. But Margaret Klein didn't back down. She doubled her efforts, rallying her base with talk of protecting tradition. Elias knew the fight was far from over, but Ethan's support gave him strength. Malik proposed a new strategy, a public art installation in the park, funded by the donations Sarah had collected. The plan was to create a temporary memorial, a sculpture of a soldier helping a wounded comrade, with Jamie's name etched prominently. "It's not the stone," Malik said, "but it's a start." Elias agreed, though he still dreamed of Jamie's name on the permanent memorial. The installation took shape over weeks, crafted by a local artist named Lena, a queer woman who poured her heart into the project. The sculpture was unveiled at a vigil with hundreds gathered. It showed two figures, one kneeling, one fallen, their hands clasped. Jamie's name gleamed in bronze, alongside a quote, "Courage is love in action." Elias touched the sculpture, tears falling. It wasn't the stone, but it was something. The unveiling drew national attention. Activists from D.C. and Richmond joined the vigils, and a senator sent a letter of support. But the opposition grew louder too. Margaret's group protested the sculpture, calling it propaganda. One night, someone defaced it with red paint, scrawling, "No gays." Elias and Sarah cleaned it off before dawn, their hands shaking with anger. "They can't stop us," Sarah said, her voice fierce. Elias nodded, but the vandalism felt personal, like a wound reopened. He started meeting with Ethan regularly, the two finding common ground in their shared service. Ethan admitted he'd struggled with Jamie's identity, raised in a home where different was wrong. "I was jealous," he confessed one night over beers. "Jamie was so free. I never was." Elias listened, seeing the man behind the anger. They talked about the war, about loss, about the weight of carrying secrets. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. The council announced a second vote, pressured by the growing support for Jamie's name. Elias prepared tirelessly, meeting with residents, sharing Jamie's story. He visited schools, speaking to kids about courage and love. One teenager, a shy boy named Lucas, approached him after. "I'm gay," Lucas whispered. "Seeing you fight, it makes me feel like I can be okay." Elias hugged him, his heart full. This was why he kept going. The night of the vote, the town hall was electric. Elias spoke last, his voice steady. Jamie didn't die for a stone. He died for us. For freedom, for love, for truth. Don't let fear win. The crowd was silent, then roared with applause. Margaret stood, her face unreadable. When the vote came, it was 4-2 in favor. Jamie's name would be added. Elias walked to the memorial that night, alone. He touched the blank stone, imagining Jamie's name there. "We did it," he whispered. But the victory felt bittersweet. The fight had cost him friends, safety, peace. He wondered if Jamie would be proud, or if he'd just want Elias to live. The council's decision was a turning point, but not an end. Engraving Jamie's name would take weeks, and Margaret's supporters vowed to appeal. Elias felt the weight of every step forward, each victory tempered by resistance. He kept the tattoo covered now, not out of shame, but to protect it from prying eyes. It was his, Jamie's, theirs. Sarah and Malik organized a celebration for the vote, a community barbecue in the park. Families came, some hesitant, others embracing the change. Elias saw Lucas, the teenager, with his parents, who looked nervous but present. He smiled at them and they nodded back. A small bridge built. Ethan was there too, helping grill burgers, his presence a quiet statement. Margaret stayed away, but her absence spoke louder than words. Lena, the artist, approached Elias with an idea. A mural on the community center wall, depicting Jamie and other unsung heroes. "Not just soldiers," she said. "Teachers, nurses, anyone who fought for love." Elias loved the idea, and they began planning. The mural became a new focal point, a way to keep Jamie's story alive beyond the stone. But the threats didn't stop. Elias found a note slipped under his door. "You won't win forever." He reported it to the sheriff, a gruff man named Daniels who'd stayed neutral in the debate. Daniels promised to investigate, but Elias saw the doubt in his eyes. That night he sat with Sarah, confessing his fear. "What if this never ends?" he asked. She took his hand. "It won't, but you're not alone." The engraving day was set for June, Pride Month, a coincidence that felt fated. Elias helped organize a ceremony, inviting veterans, activists, and Jamie's family. His mother, Rosa, and sister, Carla, who'd stayed quiet through the fight. Rosa arrived from Texas, her eyes red but warm. "You loved him," she said to Elias, hugging him. "That's enough." Carla, fiercer, added, "He'd be proud of you, Captain." The ceremony drew thousands. The stone was unveiled, Jamie's name gleaming in fresh-cut letters. Elias spoke, his voice breaking. "This is for every soldier who's been erased. Every heart told it doesn't belong. Jamie's name is here, and it's forever." The crowd cheered, and Rosa sobbed, clutching Elias's hand. Ethan stood nearby, his head bowed, a silent ally. But that night, the memorial was vandalized again. Red paint covered Jamie's name, the word shame scrawled across it. Elias arrived at dawn, his heart sinking. He and Sarah scrubbed it clean, but the damage lingered. "They won't stop," Elias said, his voice hollow. Sarah shook her head. "Neither will we." The vandalism sparked outrage. Malik's articles went national again, and the story reached new heights. A documentary crew arrived, wanting to tell Jamie's story. Elias hesitated but agreed, knowing it would keep the fight alive. The mural was completed, a vibrant tapestry of faces and stories, Jamie's at the center. Kids like Lucas visited it daily, finding strength in its colors. Elias began to heal slowly. He started therapy, talking through the grief and rage that had consumed him. He visited the memorial often, tracing Jamie's name, now permanent. Ethan joined him sometimes, their conversations growing easier. "I was wrong," Ethan said one day. About a lot. I'm trying to be better. Elias nodded. That's all any of us can do. Margaret Klein stepped down from the council, her influence fading. Some said she'd moved away. Others said she was just tired. Elias didn't care. He focused on the future, on Lucas, on Riley's letters, on the kids who needed to know they weren't alone. He and Sarah started a scholarship in Jamie's name for LGBTQ veterans, funded by donations that kept coming. One evening, Elias sat by the memorial, the setting sun casting gold over the stone. He thought of Jamie's laugh, his touch, the way he'd made the world brighter. The tattoo on Elias's chest felt warm, a reminder that love could outlast hate. He'd fought for Jamie, for himself, for everyone who'd been erased. And though the scars remained, so did the hope. The final vigil was small, just Elias, Sarah, Malik, Ethan, and a few others. They lit candles, their flames steady in the dusk. Elias looked at the stone, at Jamie's name, and smiled. "You're here," he whispered. "Forever." The town had changed, not completely, but enough. And Elias knew wherever Jamie was, he was smiling too.